Hello, my name is Kerrioth, and today we're going to discuss some pure, unadulterated heresy. And that is basically something that I would love to see in Warhammer 40k that I don't think we'll see. This is just a kind of what-if scenario. And that is a human or human-esque civilization in the game that has a playable tabletop army that is nothing to do with the Imperium of Man and is nothing to do with Chaos. Now, I'm not talking Tau auxiliaries, I'm not talking that. I'm not talking like independent traders or worlds that have managed to go rogue. I'm talking a full, either human or post-human civilization that, for whatever reason, has managed to go either undetected or has simply been ignored up until this point. Maybe it's been hidden by a particularly convenient warp storm, because let's face it, there are a shed load of those in Warhammer 40k. Oh, that area is space clear. Should we go and have a look at it? Oh, there's an entire race of things we've never seen before there, and they've colonised about 80 planets. Oh dear. It happens fairly often. It's a thing. It's definitely an occurrence. Because you see, I've been reading the Horus Heresy books again. I should really find a new series to read instead of just rereading the same one over and over, but whatever. And some of the best parts of those books are parts that have nothing to do with the actual story of the Horus Heresy. They have nothing to do with Horus's march to terror. They have nothing to do with the falling of the legions or anything like that. It's stuff that involves basically that splintered nature that humanity kind of ended up with. As everyone was separated away from each other, certain planets and certain civilizations just changed direction. They moved in different ways. And it led to some really interesting races that obviously we're not going to see in Warhammer 40k because they were annihilated utterly by by Space Marines, by Imperial Guard, by the Great Crusade, and one of its many Crusade fleets. But something similar would be nice. I mean, one of the most interesting factions that I think was touched on in the Horus Heresy, which sadly got absolutely annihilated by the Space Wolves, was the Elamic Quietude. I always want to say Quietude, but that's not a word. Mind you, I don't know if Quietude's a word either, but them, the Elamic Quietude. So, these started out as human, but as they progressed, as they evolved, they basically submerged themselves into technology to the point where they were essentially constructs, but with... I mean, you could say that it was still human minds, human brains operating them, but by that point, they were so far beyond what was recognisably human that they were obviously classed as being disgusting, abhuman filth and had to be annihilated immediately, which is exactly what happened. I really like that aspect of things. I really like the kind of little glimpses of alternate human history that we got with the Horus Heresy books. And, like the Kindbrak, for instance, that's where Erebus stole the... Now, I can never get this word right. I always want to say anathema, but I don't think it is, because I think that's spelled differently. Anatheme? The ritual anatheme? I think that's how you pronounce it. I could be completely wrong. It's the one where you stab someone with it and they get an horrible infected wound and they just die. Then they can't do anything about it. It's the perfect assassin weapon, because no matter what the status of the person that you are sticking it in, they basically don't have any defense against it. It's what was used to wound Horus, and then he got took to Davin and all that shit went down. Again, that was a human-esque culture that had diverged significantly from what the Emperor and from what the Imperium wanted as basically a baseline human. The Interrex is another one. They, like a spacefaring civilization, again, they were interesting. We didn't see a whole lot of them because they consorted with Xenos. They formed a big flotilla in space, and that's how they had their civilization. But of course, they got annihilated. The thing is, in Warhammer 40k, humanity is kind of... It's obviously the main story of 40k is centered around humanity versus chaos. We've discussed this at length before. We won't go into it again. But I feel that there's got to be room for an element of humanity that is not confined within those two incredibly different, incredibly divergent kind of civilizations. I mean, we've got the Imperium, who are just xenophobic nutters, and are out to murder anything that doesn't look human, basically. As a civilization, that is what they roughly go for, and they do a pretty good job of it, in fairness to them. And then you've got chaos, which is... well, it's chaos. It's full of traitors and heretics. But in the Horus Heresy books, we get this great glimpse of the way that humanity could have gone, the way that humanity did go before those splinter civilizations were just wiped out or just subsumed into the Imperium as a whole. And when you kind of look at the overall tapestry of Warhammer 40k and the way that the universe is, the way the galaxy is, the way that different races have been presented and then have been, in some cases, removed, RIP Squats and Sisters of Battle. The second one was mostly a joke and partly true. Anyway, let's not dwell on that, it makes me sad. But I feel like if there was to be another race introduced, on the one hand, it would be kind of cool to see another Xenos race. It would be cool to see something that is just different to what we have at the moment. At the moment, we've got a couple of solid fantasy tropes. We've got Tyranids, which is, I suppose it's not really a fantasy trope, but it's also not the most original of ideas either. Another Xenos race would be nice, but we kind of have an interesting spectrum of that. Now, we're not going to comment on how well supported they are. The fact that they exist is currently enough. The fact that they are supported on the tabletop is currently enough. I'd like to see something that doesn't show humanity as either a just war-hungry, xenophobic, fanatical organisation intent on wiping everything out. I'd like to see a faction of humanity that is not twisted by chaos, that is not intent on converting the galaxy to their way of thinking, which is that yes, human sacrifice is pretty good because you can use it to summon demons and turn people inside out, and let's face it, everyone loves a bit of that. Something that actually shows the fact that humanity does have a path outside of these two paths, because this stuff already existed. And every time I read through the Horus Heresy series, you come across these different civilizations, you come across these interesting aspects of humanity, these glimpses into alternate futures, and then you get to 40k and it's slay the heretic or kill the loyalist, and that's your lot. Like, that's pretty much it. Yes, there are renegade chapters, there are, you know, there are aspects of humanity, there are groups of humans or superhumans who don't subscribe to either of those kind of ideologies, but they're still either using stuff that the Imperial Guard uses, or they're using stuff that Space Marines use. There is splinter from that existing group, as opposed to being a group of their very own. There's a huge amount of potential to kind of show humanity in a different light, or even to present an alternative to humanity that is almost alien in a way. Like, I mean, as I say, technically the Quietude, they started out as human, but they ended up completely diverging in such an extreme way that they're not recognisably human. Even as you read in the book, it's like that's not even relatable. Like, the way they communicate, the way they operate, the way their civilization works is nothing like what you'd expect from a human civilization. But that to me just makes it more interesting, because it gives more potential to do more interesting things, to actually have that third player in the sphere of humans versus humans would open up an opportunity to make humanity as a whole in Warhammer 40k a bit more interesting. Now, there are obviously interesting and complex characters on both sides, but the nature of the way the two sides work mean that if you're being I'd say a little less than generous, it's basically just two sides of the same coin. What if we had a race that was human once? They existed as baseline humans existed. Then through technology, through interaction with Xenos, through some sort of warp corruption that they overcame even, you now have this third element, this third aspect of what humans could have been is their own empire, is their own army that basically allows you to have a force that isn't just murder that, murder that, murder that. Obviously, I mean, tabletop, everything is murder, murder, murder. That's the whole point of the game. But lore-wise, universe-wise, there's a huge amount of potential that is currently untapped by the two factions that dominate. And that's not to say the two factions that dominate are bad, but a little bit of change, a little bit of something fresh, I think generally does good for stuff that's already existing anyway. It can add a new spin to things. It can add new pressures. It can add new plot lines as a whole. If we did see a new race for Warhammer 40k, and again, I'm not saying that we will, if we did see a new race for 40k, I would want it to be another facet of humanity, an empire that has remained hidden, an empire that maybe made it out of the galaxy and then has now travelled back in, an empire that was mashed by either a warp storm, which is the convenient excuse for everything, or even had their own technological means of hiding themselves, and then for whatever reason that failed. So that we could have something that is sort of human, but completely alien. Something that was once what the Imperium is, or what the Imperium started out as, and is now just fractured off into something completely different. It's incredibly unlikely, and it'll probably never happen, but if we did get a new race for 40k, that's exactly what I'd want. I think it'd be really interesting. Question is though, what do you think? What would you like? Would you just like another Xenos race of some kind? Would you like to see something completely off the wall, out of left field, just something completely mental? Or does the idea of having a third human empire that is not the Imperium and not Chaos and has a different mindset entirely appeal to you the same way it does to me? Be interested to know what you think. Let me know in the comments down below. I always read them, as you know, because I spend half my evenings to reply to them half the time. And in the meantime, feel free to click any of the things you see on the screen. There's videos, there's a Patreon button, there's a subscribe button, all of that stuff. I'm about to cough. Held it, fixed it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you for the next video. Toodaloo.